Well, hello again. This is part 4 of my expose of the Dutch government's cover-up of a massive security breach which has been ongoing since June 2011. In this episode, I intend to expose more officials who've been involved with this and show the exact dates they became involved with this. So, to basically show which British and Dutch officials knew about this security breach and how long exactly have they known about this. As you can see from this email, I contacted the British Public Accounts Committee on the 3rd of June 2011. I sent detailed information to them that I'm not going to include here because it has far too much details in to put in this sort of film. However, that is when I sent them, 3rd of June 2011. Why did I contact the British government before the Dutch government? Well, because I'm a British citizen. Simple as that. After I sent the email to the British Public Accounts Committee, I called up and I had a long discussion with them, and we discussed the details of exactly what was happening. Regardless of any other issues I may have with the British Home Office, we did discuss what was important and what had happened here. The email you can see here is the reply I received from the Public Accounts Committee on the 6th of June 2011, where I'm informed that it's been forwarded to the clerk of the committee. So by this point, the British government knew at a senior level what was happening here. Information had been sent to them, but I'm not going to include that information. As I say, it had too much detail in. On the 14th of June 2011, I contacted the Dutch Data Protection Authority. I waited a week and a half to give the British government a head start. Again, I'm not going to apologise for that. I am a British citizen. So, back to this email. This was sent on the 16th of June 2011, and I want you to please notice the ons kenmerk at the top, which is the case number, on case number. The 5 digits at the end in this one are 01337. That's important because later on I shall demonstrate that the Dutch Data Protection Authority actually use 3 different case numbers for one case. But we'll look at that later. So at this point they just ask for more information. This next email that I received from Dutch Data Protection Authority is very intriguing for several reasons. Firstly, please notice the ons kenmerk at the top, the case number. The last 5 digits have changed. So now this is 2 cases open for one case. I opened one case, they now have 2 case references. The same lady, Ms. E. Mostard, sends me it. So 2 cases in 2 weeks, 2 case references in 2 weeks. That's the first thing. Secondly, as you can see from the large paragraph in the centre of the screen, the Dutch Data Protection Authority deny that any personal data was involved here. Now, to explain, when I first spoke to Dutch Data Protection Authority, I spoke to Ms. Mostard, and she told me she would need to make 2 separate cases, one for the non-military, which she would process for the European Commission, the World Health Organization and the United Nations Development Programme. Because they are not military organisations, she was going to process them. The military organisations were to be processed by Dutch military intelligence. But all of a sudden, they seem to have completely forgotten about the non-military case that we originally discussed on the phone. Hasn't been mentioned at any point. And they insist that no non-military staff were involved. Well, the personal data of staff of the World Health Organization, the European Commission and the United Nations Development Programme are civilian staff, and it did affect their personal data. So this is completely untrue. If we move down to the next paragraph, this is most telling. Based on your information, the matter does seem to fall within the responsibility of Dutch Ministry of Defence, who apparently contracted the firm that you work for. There we go. She acknowledges that Dutch military intelligence set up these contracts, approved these high security contracts to a company that doesn't have any security. So there it is. That's Ms. E. Mostard from the Dutch Data Protection Authority making excuses using 2 case reference numbers and telling me that Dutch military intelligence set this up, so they better sort it out. I then had to contact Dutch military intelligence. I then did contact Dutch military intelligence. We had various correspondence backwards and forwards. Information was supplied to them. We had telephone conversations. I was asked an awful lot of questions, which I was happy to answer. After a few weeks, it appeared that they intended just to cover this up. That was definitely the impression they gave me. The Dutch military intelligence were going to cover up the fact that they've given a contract to a completely inappropriate company, and as a result there's now been a security breach. So this email is dated the 18th of July 2011, and I simply asked Dutch military intelligence if they are going to do anything about this. And also I asked them, or I state, that I've just had a call from my ex-boss at Bizarre Networks, and that I refused to speak to him about the conversations we had, myself and Dutch military intelligence. So I'm just asking them, are you going to do anything, yes or no? I did receive a reply from the Ministry of Defence. As you can see, it's industrial security at ministryofdefence.nl. The reply was shocking. He just says, at the moment the answer is no. No, they're not going to do anything to the company without any security who they contracted. And we are presently in consultation with our sister service. They never did explain who exactly their sister service was, but by then the cover-up was already well underway by July 2011. I did reply on the 20th of July 2011 just to make it clear that by doing absolutely nothing when there's a massive security breach definitely gives the impression of state approval of this really incredibly low level of data protection. They're quite happy. Dutch military intelligence don't care about that sort of thing. The next correspondence I received from Dutch Data Protection Authority, you'll notice at this point, ons kenmerk again, the last 5 digits are now 01515. So this is now 3 different case references for one single case that I opened with them 2 months previously. This is, well, it's just blatant corruption. This is the first half of the letter that they sent me, so I'll leave that so you can read it for a moment. And now this is the second half of the letter. It's just waffle, isn't it? They're not going to do anything. They're just not the least bit concerned. I then had to wait another week until the 11th of August 2011. I then received another email from Dutch Data Protection Authority, this time using the third of the 3 case references that they've already used for this one case. Again, it's filled with waffle, and again they say there is no personal data. This is ridiculous. This also controlled the satellite communications of the European Commission, all of their remote sites all over the world. Their staff used those phones. It also included the World Health Organization and the United Nations Development Programme. But none of those things matter, and from the first few days when Dutch military intelligence took over, nobody has mentioned any of those organisations. Please notice that in none of these emails. Nobody even acknowledges who was affected. For the benefit of any Dutch people who are watching this movie, I'd like you to notice just how many Dutch officials have known about this. By the 16th of March 2012, it was apparent that Dutch military intelligence had already covered up everything that had happened, and the fact that they'd given top security contracts to a company that didn't have any security. But please, if you notice, all of these EU staff, Dutch EU staff, look at them all. Not one of those Dutch members of European Parliament ever replied. Not one from that whole list. We pay for these things from our taxes, and they're just completely unaccountable. They do what they want, and they're accountable to absolutely no one. Okay, just to summarise. Below are just listed a few examples of the incredibly low standards of data protection that the Netherlands considers to be acceptable. Things like a lost laptop, which can do damage to some of the world's most important organisations, simply not worth investigating. The fact that Bizarre Network staff are allowed to have unsupervised control of satellite communications of some of the world's most important organisations without any sort of background check. Again, this is not considered a problem in the Netherlands. It's okay to work for the European Commission, the UNDP, the World Health Organization, and even military without any sort of background checks on the staff. This is considered fine in the Netherlands. The other thing about Bizarre Networks was the fact that the staff were told to work from home with a laptop computer. In my case, connected to the internet by a tethered internet connection to a mobile phone, which is just ridiculous, but that's another issue dealt with in detail in part 1 of this. No checks are done on the housing situation of the staff, or who else shares the flat with Bizarre staff, or who else can see this secure data. Well, it's not secure at all, but what should be secure data. Again, by Dutch standards, this is fine. That's not a problem. Outrageous, really. The very idea that the Dutch Data Protection Authority did open a case about this, but military intelligence took over control of the case by the next day, or within 2 days, is absolutely outrageous. Also, the fact that no one questioned why Dutch military intelligence has suddenly taken control of non-military data protection case. That didn't make much sense, but no one questioned this. The very idea that Dutch Data Protection Authority used 3 different case numbers. I only opened 1 case. Why are they using 3 different case numbers? Is this so they can move evidence from one case to another and then deny that it exists later? I really don't know what that's about. Again, no one questions why Dutch Data Protection Authority used 3 different case numbers for 1 case. This is the Netherlands. People don't question corruption. Good grief. And finally, the very idea that Dutch military intelligence would give high security defence contracts to a company that had absolutely no data protection in place. And then, when a complaint was filed, the Dutch government put Dutch military intelligence in charge of investigating their own incompetence and corruption. This is the standard of data protection in the Netherlands. It would be funny if it wasn't so blatantly corrupt. I would just like to say in closing that I consider myself lucky to still have copies of all these emails. Shortly after the last email listed here, my email account was hacked and my password was changed, so I could not access my email account. I always assumed the emails were deleted. However, as I'd suspected foul play by Dutch authorities generally, I had already forwarded the emails to other email accounts and printed out and downloaded copies of the key mails. So, whoever hacked my account didn't really do any good. Thank you once again for listening to me and looking at all these emails, and please spread this as far and wide as possible. It is important what happened. The standards here should be exposed. It did affect a lot of people, and there's no reason the Dutch government should be allowed to cover this up. Thank you again. Goodbye.